Thank you for listening to another episode of the Business of Fun podcast. Not just another one, but the newest one. And this one today is one that I think you're going to dig. It's with my friend James Warren, and we talk about stories. Until I was looking back at my show notes, I forgot how much fun we had talking and like how much really like just super great stuff is in here. So I can't wait for you to hear this one. Before I tell you about what I talked to James about, let me remind you to check out my website. That's davewakeman.com, and that you should get the Talking Tickets newsletter, which is at talkingtickets.substack.com. And then don't miss the Talking Tickets Slack channel, which there is a link in the show notes, but the URL is loco, so I won't try to give that one to you. So anyway, James Warren and I were talking about stories, and this is great because I think that you know that as a trained branding and strategy and marketing person, that I understand the importance of stories, and I like to be able to teach you how to use stories and think about stories from a different way. So we had a conversation about all kinds of things around stories, processes that allow you to use stories a little bit more better. So we talked about experiences and how experiences help people grow. We talked about first person and the importance of that. We talked about opinions and how to gain attention. We talked about the explosion of cable news. We talked about brand and how it relates to what the customer thinks. We talked about data and kind of the balance between qualitative and quantitative and emotions, the yin and yang of that. How data is backwards looking. We talked about what data is reliable. We talked about learning from stories, unanswered questions, experiential themes, demographics, all kinds of really great stuff. I think this is going to be a super helpful episode for you, and I think you're going to dig it. So here's my conversation with James Warren on the Business of Fun. All right, I would like to welcome James Warren to the Business of Fun podcast. James, how's it going, man?
It's going great. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, no, this is going to be great. You sent me a note. You talked about stories, and I was like super excited to talk about stories. And I'll let you in on this, and I'll let the audience in on this a little bit. The people who are listening. I kind of went into this blind, and part of it was there was a real reason for it. It's not because I was lazy. Because sometimes I would totally cop to that too if it was lazy. It was because I wanted to try to remove my biases about stories and how you create stories and how you tell stories from the equation. I wanted to come to this with a fresh set of eyes. So hopefully you'll be happy to walk down this path with me and help me understand, how to tell better stories, how to connect with people a little bit better, because I understand how powerful stories are. I understand how they help shape data, and how essential they are to our everyday life. So I'm excited, and that's sort of my foundation for this.
Appreciate that, and I think you're actually speaking to something right off the bat that is brilliant and necessary for all of us, which is, the more experience we have in things, it's natural for us to pick up a bias or two or 10. And so as we come into places, conversations, clients, customers, communities, where we say, hey, let me put to the side for a minute what I think I know about this, because that gives us a chance to hear something new. This is the core of what we're helping our customers do, by the way, is put it to the side and learn to hear something new from their constituents. So right on.
Yeah. Well, what's cool about the way you just talked about it is it's a joke because I'm not an idiot, but I say that like I am a complete moron about things, and in a special context, which is like whenever I go into a new project or dealing with a new set of market research or anything of that nature, I tell people I'm an idiot, I'm a moron, I don't know a thing, and it's so that I create that humility in myself, so that I understand that I don't know the answers. I'm a middle-aged white man in Washington, D.C. My scope of knowledge is going to be limited. And I say that in a way that may hopefully made people roll their eyes, but I want to make it clear. It's like I don't have all the answers, right? I've never been a woman. I've never been anything but a white dude. So, that's the kind of, to me, that's the most important, one of the more important skills, not the most important, but one of the more
Yeah.
important
Yeah.
skills that you can have is like allowing yourself to know this is who I am, but I'm not everybody. And then
Yeah.
go digging into this. So
Yeah.
when you're talking about stories, start me at the beginning. Let's define from your point of view what the story means. And
Yeah.
that way we can say, have a foundation for the conversation.
Great. I mean, in the broadest sense, the way I've seen stories most of my life, and especially the last 10 plus years doing work in our company, Share More Stories. Stories are really about one of the most important parts of human expression, where a person is thinking about and relaying experiences that they've personally had in life that could be useful, helpful, or inspiring to somebody else. So we're not talking about fictional stories in this context. We're not talking about you must be a great writer and write literature. We're also not talking about just anything I put on social. I know we use the word story to cover lots of versions of content
Mm-hmm.
in our world today. And we have a very specific definition, which is that first person expression of their experience in a given topic. So it could be, this is my story about living here as a person with this background. It's a big, broad story, but it's a personal expression. Or this is a story about my time working in this company, specific to how I navigated, my leadership development. Or it could be, this is a story about my time really feeling like this brand totally understood me and got me because, man, when I experienced this product for the first time, I felt like they'd been in my head. And all those are different types of stories that the individual can tell that people on the other side of that, executives, brand managers, organizational leaders, people like us, we can learn from. So that's what we mean by story, is that first person personal expression about their own lived experience.
I think that's good because it takes a little bit of the pressure off of people, right? Because one of the biases that I was trying to make sure I put aside was so much of the conversation around stories it sets people up, I think, in a way that makes it unsuccessful for them because they have
Yes.
to feel like all of a sudden they have to be Charles Dickens or William
Yes.
Shakespeare, right? And that's not true. These personal stories, everybody has access to them.
They absolutely do. And when I remind people, we used to only do this in like workshops, and that built the platform that helped us turn it into a digital platform. But in the workshops, people would come into those sessions with either like, what do you mean by this? Or, I'm not a writer or I'm not a professional storyteller. And we'd say, you don't have to be because you have a life and you have a whole bunch of experiences, um, 10 times, 100 times those experiences and memories. So those are stories. You live in stories. You tell your kids stories without even realizing it. You tell your friend at the end of the day, or your spouse or your partner. You're telling stories almost all the time. We live in stories, whether we like it or not. And so you're exactly
Mm-hmm.
right. Let's demystify that. Let's take the pressure down. What we're really talking about is tell me what happened to you in this experience. And when you frame it that way, people get really, really opened up really quick.
Let me ask you this then, because I like the way that you're explaining this. But I think, make it clear for the people listening is what we want to do is it's a story is just your way of making sense of the world and your place
Absolutely.
in the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. On a micro level, like today, or a macro level, like my life, like why I'm here. But all of those are from the inside out. They're not from the outside in. It's not about you trying to explain somebody else's life or experience. You're just expressing your own. And that really shifts the pressure, takes away the pressure because,
Yeah.
again, like you said before, I'm trying to make sense of what's happening to me. And the
Yeah.
story helps me do that. It also helps others who are willing to listen to those stories now better understand me. This is where I'm coming from. Like we like to say, everybody's got an opinion. I care far less about opinions, is why I don't do opinion research. I care far more about what happened to you because I can argue with your opinion all day, every day. But I can't really argue besides the question of like, what if they're not telling the truth? I can't argue with what happened to you. I can argue with your takeaway from that. I could say, well, if that happened to me, I'd see it differently. But those are sort of
Yeah.
intellectual debates. I can't tell you that what you say happens didn't happen. but I can argue with your opinion all day long. So that's the other way we're shifting the conversation from traditional research, which is measuring my opinion about lots of things, to this story-based approach that says, tell me what I need to know about what's happened in your experience. It really changes the conversation inside the organization and the brand.
Is there's so much I want to ask now.
Yeah.
Yeah, because part of this is like the world seems like designed the way right now to tell people that their opinion, not their opinions, their story doesn't matter, right? It makes people feel isolated, and it makes people feel powerless. I think would be the best way I would use to describe it, which I want to touch on. But I'm curious because everybody has opinions, and I think and I'm wondering if there's a connection between this powerlessness that people feel and this almost like just rabid hanging on to their opinions. But is there a role that opinions do play in the way you tell stories?
Absolutely, because that they reveal sort of my preconceived biases about whatever I'm talking about. And so we try to break it down, not because the opinions don't matter, because they do get in the way of the story. And if the story's the missing link in what I need to know, then I got to help myself and others put that to the side. Exactly the way you did at the beginning of this conversation. You said, I spotted, I recognize it, let me put it to the side so I can listen to this person's experience about stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in the very real sense, what we tell people is it doesn't mean your opinions don't matter. If anything, this will help you better understand where your opinions came from.
Yeah.
Because our opinions come from our experiences. That's why we're not saying the opinions don't matter. I'm saying I want to get to the root of it, because we are living in this opinion economy where we get to a point of such isolation and such division on anything. We're just constantly lobbing rhetoric and opinion at each other rather than seeking to understand each other through our actual experiences. And I think that's true in our society. It's true in the organization, and it's true in the marketplace. It's true in the brand world. Everything needs to be, shock and awe and fast. And I got to go over the top. I got to say it with more reverence to get people's attention. That opinion economy is what's driving the attention economy. And there's something else behind, which is, well, what's the connection economy look like? How do we form deeper connections that allow us to have more genuine and authentic relationships with each other, with the folks who serve us, our brands, et cetera? So, that's a whole lot there that we just said. But that's starting to get at the why this stuff matters to us as a company and matters to me deeply as a person.
Yeah, it's funny that we've spent so much time talking about personal things, because I did this will come out about the same time as your podcast is, with a woman I know from Birmingham, or from Manchester, England, in the UK, a woman named Katie Rains. And we were talking about, she came from a working class family, and she's now in the arts. And I've spent a long time in arts, and a lot more time in sports. I've kind of been in everything. But we were talking about it, and it's like, she was telling me the story of her grandfather, who was a coal miner in England, in Liverpool, and how even though he was like somebody who you wouldn't necessarily traditionally think would be an artist person, somebody who appreciated opera and arts, they infused their home and her parents with art, and that led down to her. And that was like a way, like these personal stories. It helps, like it helps you understand where those opinions come from, which is interesting, because I want to go back to that idea of powerlessness and the opinion. I wonder if a lot of times, and I think you've already answered the question, but if so, I want to tease it out a little bit more. I wonder if people don't even understand how much impact their personal stories are having on these opinions, and especially when you consider the fact that so much of this stuff, like the opinion and driving the attention, can feel fact-free or, fact adjacent, however you would like to frame it.
Yeah. Wow. A few things there. I would say we have, in a remarkably short amount of time, 20, 30, maybe 40 years, in the environments we're in, especially in this country, in this society, maybe parts of Europe too, the explosion in cable news systems, the explosion in social media, the explosion in content, all of those things, the one thing that hasn't grown nearly as fast as those things are the capacity of the human mind to process all of that information. So our human capacity for information processing has not grown exponentially. We've grown as audiences at a pretty rapid clip, but that's not
Mhm.
exponential either. So we're exploding the amount of content and information that we create and that others create that we expect individuals to process in ways that humanity's never had to do before. So we're looking for shortcuts all the time, and the shortcuts become, my opinion is my filter for this. My opinion is how I project myself onto the world. It's how I quickly seek out certain content. It's how I quickly assess whether this piece of information or content is likely to not serve me, but align maybe with what I know. Because the brain wants as little friction as possible in these
Mhm.
things. So that is what's driving our echo chambers in a broader civic sense. It's also driving the commodification of our relationships with products and brands and goods and services. And some of those companies get it and exploit it. Some of those companies get it and don't want it. They want to have a better relationship with their customers. This desire to understand, well, what's really motivating them helps us get there. And this is definitely true inside the organization from a workplace culture standpoint. So one thing I want to say real quick before we keep moving is the other thing that you were teasing out for me is, where do these individual stories go, right? And what that really means is, okay, I've listened to 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 stories. So what? And the so what factor becomes, you want to understand what's the story of your brand. It's not what you as the brand manager or the CMO thinks it is. It's what your consumers
Mhm.
know it is. And they know it in a personal way, whether you see it as transactional or not. So it's a function of how closely connected they are to your brand. And some products we don't have to think that hard about, but even those decisions are based on shortcuts in our brain
Mhm.
that are the result of our experiences.
Right.
And products we think a lot about that are emotionally rich, we are definitely processing those decisions through the experiences and the emotions attached with those. And so it starts to move from just listening to people so that they feel heard to, what can I do with this kind of insight and engagement if I'm really reprioritizing not just what they think or do, but why they think and do it. And that's where the story starts to unfold some new answers.
Yeah, the idea that like the story doesn't exist in you it exists in the customer is something I totally like push all the time because I just did a global survey for my newsletter, and it was amazing how few people did any kind of brand tracking. And I was like, going, well, how do you know what people feel about you if you don't ask them? Because I was like, just because you think you're X, Y, and Z, it doesn't mean that that's what other people think. And if you don't know, you're sitting there going, my God, we're doing such a great work. And then all of a sudden, no, because people have the exact opposite belief of you. Or maybe they picked up one of the things, but not the other two. And then you want to know why.
Thing that you're talking about for the brand, by the way,
Yeah,
oh, this is how most of us are living our lives. Like none of us
so
really want
that's
to
true
know
too.
everybody. It's like,
I did.
I'm not ready for all that feedback right now. I would like to pretend that I'm amazing, and everybody loves me, and I can do no wrong. And that's not really how I want to live my life. But I've had moments where I'm like, please let this feedback be good, because I don't know if I can handle
Please
what I'm going to hear if I ask for honest feedback. And they'll say, well, you told me to be honest. And I'm like, well, damn, I mean, honest.
don't be too
you know,
honest, though. Please. Can you sugarcoat that honesty just a
Yes, I mean, give me
touch?
the old-fashioned Oreo cookie of feedback. Give me a sandwich of this. I need something on there, the ends
Yeah.
to be able to take it in.
Okay. So, all right. So we the story is personal.
Yes,
It's about your experience in the world, which I think is helpful because then it takes a little bit of the burden of story of, let's
sure.
say, air quotes, people can't see it because we don't use the video, but the mythical story. It,
Yeah.
it takes it gives and it gives the power back to the person. It
Yes.
relies on you being aware of who you are and why and these experiences that are happening to you. People are probably a lot of people listening to it are probably kind of confused because and I think there's probably a couple of reasons for it, but probably the big one is that I'm probably guilty of this as well. It's like going, people don't know what they want until I give it to them, right? And they kind of like they still feel like they have to be kind of the wizard hiding behind the curtain and the Wizard of Oz and like having all these all encompassing power. And I think part of that belief in the power of their own ability to see the world and know what to give to people or know how to approach people or know what to tell people is built on data and like this overwhelming amount of data that people have. And my philosophy has always been that like, when the data is great. I love the fact that we have all these data points and all this data that we have access to. I also think it's dangerous because it's all looking backwards. And it's all built on, it can kind of just be like a funnel. And it's just getting, or like a fire hose full of stuff that you're getting. What is the role of data in storytelling? And, how do you help people understand that, like, you have to, again, maybe getting back to that humility you talked about before, especially when I feel like society and the business environment and the world we live in has trained people that they feel like they need to have all the answers all at once.
Brilliant. So much to unpack there. I would say the first piece is when you say, like, what role does data play in stories? Stories are data. That's one of the first things we help them understand is if data are discrete pieces of information that you can collect and understand through measurement, stories are data, just a different type. There are things we do, by the way, with stories to make them easier to process and understand so that people who are much more quantitatively oriented can still make sense of all of this qualitative mass of human expression. Like, I don't want to see that. I need numbers in a chart.
Yeah.
But there's people on the other side of that who are like, don't tell me charts, tell me a story. And those two things are not incompatible. In fact, they're yin and yang. And so the first thing I would say is, if you go back to your premise, right, the data is backwards looking, even if you're using it as a really, really robust element of your forecasting strategy, predictive analytics, all of those good things. I will tell you that at some point, the value of the prediction wanes. And you have to ask yourself, am I good with being right 90% of the time? If that's really, really hard to do, then yeah. But if 90% is sort of the baseline and you're looking for differentiation, you got to be right 95% of the time, 97% of the time. So what's going to close that gap in making your prediction right? And when you say, we ask people what they want, sometimes the answers we get are very, they may not always be the most reliable. I think they're lying to us, but sometimes they're not thinking that hard about the question. And so the answer they give you can be very, very circumstantial, sort of very, ethereal in the moment. Like, well, yeah, you asked me today which color I like, red or yellow. I was in a red mood. You asked me tomorrow, I might like yellow. It's like, I can't decide what packaging I should do with that approach. And so the story is not so much about saying, give me a longer form explanation of what you like. The story is about saying, tell me about your experience navigating this product, this brand, or this experience. What did you love about it? What did you hate about it? What really stuck with you? Maybe even what did you learn from it? And why is it important to you? Those answers help me do one thing that's really, really important. Let's take two consumers, same product, same brand. All their demographics are the same. All their behavioral characteristics are the same. The data, consumer A and consumer B, match perfectly, right? The only thing I don't know about A and B is their why. So I don't know why A is our customer any more than I know why B is our customer. But I know that they're both our customers. They both look the same and they both behave the same. Here's the test. If something better comes along, and so I don't want to say better, if something different comes along, and customer A stays with our brand and customer B goes to this new thing, I'll sit there going, wait a minute, I don't understand, why did customer B leave? They look the same, they behave the same. Why did customer B leave? Because they had emotional needs that you didn't know about. Customer A feels like your brand and product meet their emotional needs. Customer B is saying it's good enough for now, so it's retention, but it's not satisfaction. It's not loyalty.
Yeah.
So when something better comes along that better meets my emotional needs, I'm going to pursue that as often as possible, depending on the friction and the barriers of switching. So that's the application. That's exactly what some of our customers do with it. They're like, you got to understand the differences that maybe I don't see in the traditional data sets we have, so that I can better understand where we're going. Say, skate to where the puck is going, not to where it is. That'll help me make better sense of what these customers are doing and why they're doing it.
And I think the way you just talked about it kind of underlines my frustration with lookalike audiences, because everybody loves like the idea of lookalike audiences. And I go, the thing about it is, I will say that when you go for like demographic data and like all these like lookalike things, that's just astrology. It's like, everybody's all cancers are the same and all Scorpios are the same and everything. And I go, if you don't know the emotional need, right? Like kind of like, and it could be frustration, it could be joy, it could be whatever it is, then like all of that other stuff is just color, right? The core is that emotional need for buying. And
Yes.
I get it. People are going to tell me like, oh, there's like certain things that you just buy because I just need it, right? And I'll tell you that I think you're wrong because I'm going to use an example of myself. It's because I always get Marvis toothpaste, which costs about $11 a tube. And why? Because when Crest probably works just as well. It's because it makes me feel good. It makes me feel like my wife says, it makes me feel rich. And it's like nothing has to be just a throwaway commodity thing. And I think that's at the heart of what you're talking about when you're talking about how people use data, but maybe I'm missing something.
I think you're right.
I also saw you shaking your head about that, the lookalike audiences. And I was like, I got him.
As marketers, business leaders, we're understandably trained to say, let me look at a market, let me define it, let me disaggregate it. Let me see where are the segments that either we could grow in, we could do better in, or if we're entering the market, that seems like a good place for us to start. And if you're a startup or a founder early, some of the best data you're going to get is from actually doing the thing and learning what's working, what's not working. But you still got to go ask why. That's a different decision-making process in a large organization with a traditional brand, where what you're really asking yourself is, where are my opportunities for growth?
Mm-hmm.
What drives growth for this brand or product? Is the category growing or declining? Is our brand growing or declining? Is the consumer shift the reason why, or are there other reasons? So I get it. There are plenty of reasons why marketers sit there and say, yeah, but not going to invest that much time or energy into that question because potential return on investment is way too small. It's a mature industry. Growth is in fractions of a percentage point. So I get all of those things. I think when you are really exploring what we call the unanswered questions in your data, you have to start saying, well, are we missing some data to answer the question? If the data doesn't tell me why people are leaving the brand or why this category is declining, or why my competitors are growing share in a declining category, then I might be missing some part of the data equation. And I would submit to them they're missing the most human part of it. They're missing the story. Because in moments of change or inflection, the stories can often explain it to us in ways that immediately ring true, but the data can't predict yet because the data hasn't seen it yet. So until it has seen it and processed it, the prediction is a crapshoot. It's a coin toss. And I think that's true in the way, if a lookalike audience is, I agree with you in a lot of respects, they don't do anything other than create the larger coin toss. You still could get 2% click-through rates with a very different lookalike audience or a very different set of criteria. It's useful if you are going to be very diligent in testing lots of different variables to say in a purely statistical way, what's different from this audience criteria set versus this one. And if you find better execution in this one, use it. But you will still wind up asking yourself, why did it work better? And the answer isn't because in this case, we included people who read this page on Facebook and this one we didn't. That's not the answer.
Yeah.
That's just the data. It's not the answer to the question.
Yeah. Though in the way I teach people how to approach this, and I'll be curious because I want to see what you think about this, is when they are defining their market and like segmentation. Because I'm like really big on like, we got to go back and segment your market because like I'll deal with people who have not gone back and segment, like done any of this stuff in like years. And when I say years, I mean 5, 6, 7, in some cases 10 years. And I go, nothing's changed in 10 years. And so the way I teach people to focus on this stuff is like I go, because like you said, you can get tricked, I think, by some of the data, right? It's just the data. What you're looking for is things that are meaningful and then actionable. Yeah. Because you can see all these things like your Facebook page example you used. Is that meaningful or actionable? And it might be meaningful, but if it's not actionable, then it's like it's just another variable. And it probably is confusing. But but I'm curious about, if, my approach, how it fits with what you do.
think it does in a lot of ways because one of the things we have learned with some of our more recent customers is they've told us verbatim this approach of learning from people's stories has helped me make sense of this other data I have. And honestly, I love that because I'm not here trying to tell them throw out all the systems you have, throw out all the data you have. That would be reckless. It has value. But what I'm trying to get them to understand is that the value has a limit. And when you reach that limit, you can't ignore the fact that you've reached that limit. You have to start asking, what else do I need to know to better answer this question? And that's what we're talking about, these stories. And what we do with them is you talked about emotions and needs. You're looking at the story, we're breaking it down into smaller sections, and we're quantifying 55 different emotions in that section. So it's not like just, hey, this group of people, these are the things that they care about. This is what they feel. We're saying, to your point about joy or sadness or achievement or vulnerability, we're measuring those things. So part of that is diagnostic. What's happening in your experience? But part of it is also strategic. If I want to build a brand or reinforce these brand attributes, the question is, do my consumers today reflect those attributes and their emotions about their experiences with us? If they do not, then our experience with the brand is not delivering on the brand values, brand strategy, the brand positioning. But if they do, then I want to begin like, tell me exactly how that happened. What was that experience that made you feel so aligned with the brand? Because I want to replicate the hell out of that. That's the thing that I should be turning to my marketing team saying, hey, we've cracked the code on this. We not only understand what they feel and why, but we also understand what they're doing with the product that is making them feel that. That should be what we start reinforcing in our marketing and messaging.
Yeah. So you talked about that joy or creating that wonderful customer experience. And so I'm curious because I try to get people to look at it like this kind of research and like understanding people from small to large, right? Yeah. So like I'm having a conversation with James right now. And so like I understand how you feel about stories. And so what I would do is like going, oh man, I talked to James. A couple of things that I learned was, like let's say is that he had this really great experience doing X, Y, and Z. So then I would say, let me go and see let me talk to 2 or 3 other people. And then if I start seeing a pattern, that's when I start extrapolating more. Because stories are so personal, and like you talked about how personal it is and how individualized it is. How do you translate the one person story, that one-to-one thing, into like a bigger audience? Because when we're talking about brands and brand attributes, which was, I love that that you're using that term here, because again, it's coming from you, not from me this time. So it's awesome. You need to speak to a larger, bigger audience, so how do you get from that one-to-one thing to that bigger group in your practice?
Absolutely. So, you nailed it. We're going from one to few to many, and being intentional about that, being a good steward in that process matters a lot, right? So sometimes we have projects that are intentionally small in scope because they're a pilot, or they're trying to just, you've not talked to these people before, and you're going to learn a lot from talking to 50. You're going to learn a lot from talking to 25. But then once you've got a good sense of those, and you start to say there are some differences, what do those differences look like? Then I can start to expand, either because I already know that's the group I want to go after, or because I'm still in learning mode. But to your point, I want to see how big is this? How widespread is this? So when people come into let's say we're doing a project with a brand and we've recruited some of their existing and maybe some of their competitive customers. They'll come into the platform. They will share a story, either in text or an audio recording. Their story is in response to a prompt, right? So that prompt is, what are we trying to understand about their experience that will help, you said it beautifully, meaningful and actionable, that will help our customer take enlightened action. Mm-hmm. When they share those stories, in the real sense, you're seeing the counts go from 2 to 5 to 20 to 50 to 100. So that's already beautiful because I can see that more and more people are starting to respond and share their stories. The way we are analyzing them yields several key pieces of information. The first is, as you pointed out, what are the big experiential themes? What are the buckets of experience that are simply coming out of the stories? Because while they are all unique, they will have some things in common. The beautiful thing about this process, it reveals what we call hidden commonalities. So we might have demographic differences, we might have behavioral differences, but if our emotions, our needs, our values are the same, that's a huge opportunity for the brand. So our product reveals those as emotional data. They also reveal those emotional themes as data. And then the final thing they do is they say, if you were to look at this group of people and segment them, not so much based on their behaviors and demographics, but on their common sets of emotional needs, you would find 3 or 4 or 5 audience segments that I guarantee you don't see today in your data. And what those segments look like to them, they're emotionally defined. They're based on their attitudes about the brand or the experience. And then you work backwards from there and you say, okay, well, who's in this group? Oh, this is what they look like demographically. This is what their behaviors are. This is what they consume. So now I can actually go target them. My target looks nothing like it would have looked if I didn't have that emotional segmentation.
Yeah, no, I totally get like this is to me this is great, and it seems almost nonsensical to me. But I understand that like it's also like something that people struggle with. And when I think about how you get people to reframe their experience working on something like this, to embrace and try,
Yeah,
to use stories and research in this way.
absolutely.
You have
I
a
know
different
you're.
set. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say you have a different set of experiences than I do. So how do you encourage people? Like what are some of the steps people can take? Especially small ones that they can, so they can see the power of this immediately.
So I love that question because it reinforces the whole premise. We tell stories about how others have used this kind of approach and this method to learn something that maybe they didn't learn, or to answer a question that had been eluding them for some period of time, and more than anything to strengthen their connection and relationship with their employees or their consumers or their communities. And so as we do more of that, the stories start to become the way people understand and access it. I know that your listeners can't see this, but I want to show it to you because I think it'll help you get a really, really
Okay.
interesting sense of what we're talking about, right? And
Hmm.
so let's say let me move this a little far over here. Great. So let's say we were doing a project with YMCA. This is a public project, so I can share it with you.
Sure.
We did a pilot with about 75 top YMCAs in the country where we wanted either a CEO or one of their top executives, maybe their CMO, to participate in this study because the Y nationally is really, really focused on solving the problem of loneliness. And when you think about the Y, people think about a place to go work out or swim, but it really has lots of other offerings, and also the impact that it has on people is much deeper when you actually study it. So there's a brand there, there's a positioning there, but there's also lots of really meaty attributes that they sometimes have a hard time talking about. We did this pilot with a partner, Triangle 2, and we wanted to understand from this group of leaders what were their experiences having relationship and connection in the Y. And so they come to a project like this where they see this big prompt. Think about a time when the Y helped you develop or strengthen a relationship with someone in your life. And they respond to that prompt, they write their own story. And as the stories are written, they start to come in and they are very, very rich. Just had a word minimum of like 150, and people are writing 800 words because this is a really, really profound topic, right? When you say, tell me about the time when you built relationships, folks are like, oh, well, that's what my whole Y experience is like. So they answer those questions. What we start to do is we start analyzing what that means. So I told you before that we are sort of analyzing and scoring the data in terms of the stories that they are sharing and the emotions that those stories create. This is what that looks like. We're scoring it for these 55 different emotions and attitudes. So achievement, right? We didn't say, tell me about when you feel a high level of achievement. But achievement is one of the most critical aspects of the Y's value proposition. In fact, their whole statement is achievement, relationships, and belonging. So it's great to see achievement showing up really, really high when they start talking about their experience with the Y. That's a confirming or validating piece of data. It would be a problem if achievement showed up really, really low, because it would either mean that part of the Y's value proposition is lacking for these people, Or would it would mean like we're somehow not connecting achievement to their why experience. And then the last piece is, in the hands of an analyst or an executive, I can go in and say, well, tell me more about that. I could say things like, what are some of the, if I can type fast enough, what are some of the key themes, people's experiences in the YMCA, right? And it'll take a minute or so, 30 seconds, and it'll start to answer that question. So I can start having an ongoing dialogue with the platform to explore more deeply this question that I've asked, the stories that people have shared. And it's going to give me some high level themes. It's going to tell me what those themes represent in terms of people's experiences. And then it's going to allow me to start pulling that information into like a report. And so you see right here in 20, 30 seconds, high level, immediate takeaways around people's experiences. Community and connection is really, really key. These people are engaged in a long-term way. The longer they're engaged, the better the relationships they have.
Yep.
It's supportive based on interactions with other people. But this is one of the ones that really jumps out. The relationships at the Y enable a lot of personal growth and self-discovery. So, you do this as an analyst or as a researcher, and you start accessing people's stories. You ask the question, how do I make sense of all that? How do I go from one or two stories to a few to a lot? That's how you do it. You start collecting them and you start analyzing them. And it really informs you about what people are experiencing in ways that maybe the survey doesn't always get at, or that the focus group does, but it's hard to scale.
Yeah. I think the lesson I would try to teach people too is that like you're looking for, like, again, don't look for one specific piece of information, look for the themes, because then
right.
When you're able to aggregate this data as such, it comes out and people use different words, right? Like, and that was what came up in the example you just showed that people can't see, but I could see, is that there were a lot of things that were reinforced each other, that were similar things. But what really was powerful to me was that you said it was achievement, relationships, and belonging, or the brand attributes that the YMCA focuses on, and those all showed up. And I think that like what's powerful about this stuff is that this helps you understand that, like, yes, I am hitting the message that I need to for people. Then you can answer the different questions, like going, how do I help get more people? Like if you're the why, and then it's like going, yes, I got to tell those stories.
Yes. We had a CEO say to us, this validates why I've spent 30 years in the Y. This is the kind of stuff that we've always sort of known intuitively or individually, but we could not prove or measure. And I said, why does that matter? And they put words to our value proposition. They said, well, because now that I can explain it and we can define it, we can be more intentional about it. Instead of it just being this thing that spins as a result of the why, we can be like, this is the most important part of the why experience, and we want to design for this. We want to expand people having this experience versus it just being sort of up in stance or a big disconnect between what we feel about the why and what actually happens at the why. We can close that gap for more people. And that, to your point, you do it by telling the stories that bring these things to life. The next iteration of that analysis would say, give me some examples of people's stories for each of these themes. Now I'm putting words to the themes instead of saying, one story tells me the whole thing. No, you got 100 stories here, or you got 1,000 stories. What are they telling you thematically? Let's make those really come across as human expressions with quotes. And then let's show the data, like what percentage of the audience feels this way. Now you've got a whole different way of looking at your audience. And to your point, that's gold in the hands of the marketer because they can really connect in a different way.
Yeah. From a marketing standpoint, one of the big frustrations I have is that people, they make it they commoditize the marketing.
Yes.
And they make it so that it's all just about like attributes, or it's just everything looks just like everybody else's. And what this kind of research does, and the kind of work that you do, it takes that and it makes marketing do what it's supposed to do, which is like connect people, engage them, like emotionally I want to say, I was going to say manipulate, but that sounds right and wrong at the same time. But it does. It emotionally manipulates you because it puts you in a different state of mind. And that's really what the best stories do, is they put you in a different frame of reference.
Just they connect us. They definitely influence us. I'm influenced by somebody who shares an experience that I feel like immediately, well, I can relate to that person. That's why our best public speakers, our best, folks who like to do sales and business development,
Yeah.
they all know these things by now. Like if I start with a story, I create an immediate connection. And the challenge that our listeners are probably thinking is that sounds great one-on-one, but how do I do that at scale? And the question is not so much whether or not you can have a conversation with 10,000 or 100,000 or a million customers one at a time. The challenge is whether or not you can change the way you connect with them at scale by rooting it and grounding it in experiences of people just like them. This is not about us, it's about them. So if we know that 1,000 people feel this way, we can be pretty confident that at least a few 100,000 or maybe a million feel that way. And we can say, now I can communicate with this audience at scale in a way that's going to feel more emotionally authentic to them. Yeah. That's the whole point, is to really make that connection deeper and give yourself a chance to differentiate in that market of sameness. Because you're exactly right. There's a lot of sameness out here. It's just like, oh, that's why unaided recall is almost a thing of the past. It's like, yeah, I don't know. Have you ever heard about this? I have no idea. Because a 6-second ad is a race to the bottom. There's only so much I can store in my active memory. But if you're flooding that with a higher quantity and a lower quality, I don't know what I saw in the last hour. I have no idea. But if you tell me what made me feel a certain way or what kind of experiences I had, then all of a sudden I start recalling people, places, things, and brands and products and experiences that I wouldn't recall at all if you said, do you remember seeing an ad from this? No, I do not.
Oh, no. Answer. Well, and that's not, and just so people understand, that's not even unaided research. That's aided awareness, and people don't remember the thing. Yeah, this is like a fight that I have constantly, because I go, all I do a lot of times, I'm walking up and around Times Square and Broadway, and I'm sitting there looking at all the ads, and they all look the same. Not the ones on the billboards and some of that stuff, but on Broadway, like the theaters. I'm like, you have some of you're telling stories which are like they're all different. They're all individual. They all connect with people in some different way. Yet the way you sell it is like, and you could just be one of 100 other plays that are going on, 100 other musicals, and I just am like, please stop.
We're fooling ourselves. And I know we're almost at time, but you just said something that really resonates for me. And we're fooling ourselves as marketers and just as people to assume none of us can be all things to all people. We know that as individuals. We forget it as marketers. And so I think a lot of the reason why we become addicted to sameness is we think that's the safest way to not unintentionally turn off or distance a potential customer. They were never really your potential customer. They're somebody else's. You need to get so crystal clear on your message, your why, your brand's what it stands for, but the people who are meant for your brand will find you. And believe me, there's a lot of clutter they got to cut through, and a lot of clutter you got to cut through to get there. But people seem to be willing to do that when the resonance is really high, when the relevance is really, they're like, you know what? I had one experience with this and it changed my life. No amount of ads can do that. No amount can do that. And so I think sometimes we trick ourselves, to use our earlier phrase, into thinking, if I just play to the middle, everybody is in play. No. Playing to the middle means almost nobody's in play. Find the thing that makes you unique. And it's not what you think, it's what they think about you that makes you unique. And that's what you should be, really focusing, doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on.
Yeah. And that is so true. And it's a lesson that I try to teach. I tell people all the time, I go, I'm just me. I go, the fact that I have worked with people all over the world. I go, in all these different settings. I go, it's not because I'm competing with other brand and strategy consultants, because I'm not. I'm me. And that's my specific message, because I know that I can't win if I'm competing against McKinsey, or if I'm competing against any number of other people. I have to be unique. And I think that's the most important thing about understanding stories and the research and the processes that you use to help people understand these and use these better is that it's about using the personal, and being unique to you and the people you want to reach and talk to and serve.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said.
So James, where do people find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can go to company perspective, go to sharemorestories.com. That's where you can find out the most stuff about us. If you want to learn more about the Seek tool and platform, go to Seek, SEEQ, platform.com, all one word, seekplatform.com. Well, then I spend most of my time on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I mean, not all of my time, but all my online time. I spend a lot of my time on LinkedIn. And my profile there is James-Warren-Seek, SEEQ. So I'd love to connect with folks over LinkedIn. I love that place as a platform for conversation. And next time we'll talk more about where LinkedIn and other social platforms are going or not, and what that means for the marketer and the brand. But for now, it's a good place for me to engage and connect.
Yeah. And I'll put links to that in the show note because we didn't even get to talk about Seek. But
yeah,
James,
I mean, we did in a sense, like this is, I mean, again, maybe we'll show a couple of screen grabs. We've got a couple of videos that do a little bit of what you and I just did, because I'd love for your audiences to see it with their own eyes. Because to your point, it's different and it's new, and we have some preconceived biases about stories in general and about learning and listening. This helps us get past some of that.
Yeah, I guess like the final thing before I say goodbye is like, did I do a good job of muting my biases for the conversation?
I think so, because if anything, I would have thought you were somebody who was gung ho on stories. The way you made space to hear about it, I think it's a great role model, a great example of how we as leaders and facilitators, conveners, can really help other people recognize the value of humility. I said, if you can balance confidence and humility, you can go a long way. So we know what we know. The real question is, what don't we know? And that's where humility comes in. So I think if we're open to learning new things, to listening to a new perspective, it can change us in an hour. Imagine what it can do if we adopt it as a practice.
Yeah. And I am gung ho on the stories, but the fact that I was able to, still come through and find out learn some new stuff, I think hopefully comes through. So James, man, thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Do me a favor and let me know what you thought of my conversation with James by sending me an email to my name, dave@davewakeman.com. Check out my website, davewakeman.com, for the blog, for the store, for all the stuff that's going on with Dave as we continue into 2026. Get the Talking Tickets newsletter at talkingtickets.substack.com, and make sure you join our Slack channel. 53 minutes into this or so, give or take. I thank you so much for listening. Do me a favor, rate and review it on your favorite podcast platform. It helps the podcast grow, helps people discover it, all the things. And if you know someone who would benefit from a story like this one with James, or a conversation with someone like this one with James, share it with a friend, colleague, coworker, whoever you think will benefit. It helps, again, encourage guests to come on, helps people discover the podcast, and it's just the right thing to do, right? So thank you for doing that. As always, I couldn't do this without you, so thank you for listening, and until next time, take it easy. I'll see you soon.